Welcome. When it comes to wealth and income inequality, most people want a living wage, not charity. That's why I believe the minimum wage must increase to $15 an hour over the next several years and be tied to inflation. But the minimum wage is not the cause of income inequality, just a symptom. Most people know that our economic system is rigged, but how? There will always be income and wealth inequality. Some people are more talented, gifted, smarter, attractive, charming, stronger, and the sexes aspire to different jobs. But these factors alone can't explain our avalanche up economics. I have come to realize that the root cause of wealth and income inequality is our monetary system that is based on a fraud by the early money lending goldsmiths called fractional reserve lending. Goldsmiths had the best safes and strong boxes to secure a person's gold or silver. Clients would pay the goldsmith to secure their wealth, and the goldsmiths would issue banknotes that they could redeem for their money in hard coinage. These banknotes began to be used in place of gold. When the goldsmiths realized that only a fraction of people, maybe 20%, demanded their money in hard currency, they began lending out their clients' money behind their backs. When it was discovered that the money lenders did not have the money to pay back their loans, they were punished for fraud, but this seldom happened. This type of counterfeiting has today been dignified and legalized as fractional reserve banking. In fact, that is why we call our private banking monopoly the Federal Reserve. For every dollar in reserves, the banks can create $9 in new money loans based on your credit score. If you or I could create money out of thin air and charge interest for it, well then who couldn't rule the world after a time? Wealthy people get the lowest interest rates to buy income-producing assets such as stocks, bonds, rental property, while the rest of us borrow at high interest rates. In other words, banks create money at the top of the wealth pyramid to benefit the top of the wealth pyramid. The Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. When Congress gave bankers the money power, they enslaved Americans as servants to the lender, made bankers the ruling class and able to direct our governing policies. To call this a rigged economic system is a colossal understatement. Since banks create the principal but not the interest to pay back their loans, without new loans to replenish the money supply, our debt-based monetary system would dry up. A great example of this was the Great Recession of 2008. When banks quit borrowing, the money supply disappeared as loans were paid back. But many borrowers defaulted on their loans because businesses shut down, weren't hiring, and workers were laid off. Therefore, our debt-based money economy requires constant growth. Just to give you an example, if our economy doesn't increase by 3% per year, then the economy suffers. People are out of jobs and so on. That means that every 20 years the economy doubles. Well, as Kenneth Boulding, a British economist, once said, anyone who thinks you can have exponential growth go on forever in a finite world is either a madman or an economist. Obviously, fractional reserve banking is unsustainable economically and ecologically. So how do we create an economic system that is sustainable economically, environmentally, and benefits all? On the state level, I propose to reintroduce into the Minnesota legislature legislation known as the Minnesota Transportation Act, which regulates banks to create the interest to pay back their loans in the form of infrastructure. I would modify the act to require state-chartered banks to create money interest-free without bonding taxes and apply it to transportation, rural broadband, and renewable energy infrastructure. On the national level, instead of giving private bankers the money power, we return the money power to the people for whom it rightfully belongs by ending fractional reserve lending. In 2011, H.R. 2990, the National Emergency Employment Defense Act, the NEED Act, introduced by Congressman Dennis Kucinich, did just that. All that matters is the quantity of money. If we issue too much money, then there's inflation. Issue too little, we have deflation. Therefore, we need to keep our money at a nominal value. Under fractional reserve lending, of course, if you aren't getting 2% raise every year, you're falling behind. That means our money is constantly losing value under fractional reserve lending. So this kind of legislation is going to help us keep the value of our money constant. H.R. 2990 monetizes our multi-trillion-dollar debt instantly and pays it off. It incorporates the Federal Reserve Central Bank and creates a monetary authority within the Treasury Department that will introduce money into the economy in the form of infrastructure, education, and health care. Since this bill would have ended the money power of the bankers, the biggest lobbyists in Washington, it's no surprise that this bill never made it out of committee. We need to reintroduce this important legislation. On June 10th, 2018, Switzerland voted 26% in favor of the Wahlgeld initiative, meaning sovereign money or the people's money. Although the Wahlgeld lost due to the money interest campaign of confusion and scare tactics, it won a respectable amount of votes. Let's not forget that the bankers and the money interests were going to lose huge sums of money if the money power were returned to the people by ending fractional reserve lending. They were scared out of their wits. In their initiative, instead of the people going into debt to the bankers would go into debt to the people. You can read these proposed laws in precise detail here at votewright.org. In my view, bankers should be our servants, not our masters. Thanks for joining me. Now, let's get growing.